let me introduce Judge Wendell Griffin from Arkansas. You sit on the bench there. What court level are you at there?
I am a circuit judge. That's the judges of general jurisdiction.
Okay.
I was originally an appeals court judge on the Court of Appeals from 1996 to 2008, and then I lost a re-election bid and won an election as a circuit judge in 2010. I've been that job since 2011.
Okay. And you've been an outstanding activist and advocate for social justice issues, and so we're going to want to hear more about that. But I want to start with having you talk to us about what you feel your calling has been. And certainly in life, we can have more than one calling. So tell us a little bit about what you feel your purpose and your calling has been.
I started out with the intent to be a lawyer, and did not want to be a preacher because I thought God could do a whole lot better. And I accepted the fact that God knew a whole lot better what God wanted me to do than I did. And so I accepted the call to be a preacher, but my lawyer preacher role as judge mainly brings me to the calling of activist, of troublemaker, to borrow from John Lewis, trying to make good trouble, trying to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and trying to expose both the glory of the calling of being a child of God and the gory details that we are doing to ourselves and the world, oftentimes by misrepresenting God.
Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of misrepresentation happening at the moment. So
sadly, you're right. Sadly, you're right.
When do you remember first feeling called into these? And it's probably maybe the sequence of events, but tell us how that all evolved.
The lawyer calling came to me after I flunked out of college, and because I was going to major in physics, and I went to college as a 15-year-old freshman, and promptly began studying whiskey and women instead of math and physics, and flunked out. While I was out of college taking correspondence courses, I realized that I really didn't want to be a physicist. I really wanted to work as an agent of change, and I wanted to be a lawyer because at that point in time, in 1969, King had died, Bobby Kennedy had died, Malcolm X had died. The Vietnam War was in full force, and the people who were making the changes and doing the radical difference making were lawyers. They were challenging oppressive systems, and I wanted to use my competitive instincts to be a change agent. And so that was the first sense. I became a political science major and focused in pre-law. And then after I got out of the Army, I went into law school. People had told me I was going to be a preacher for years, since I was a child. And I did not want to believe it. When I was in law school, after the first year of law school, my sense of call came to me very strong in ministry, but I had returned to law school. I'd left the Army, gone to law school. My wife had married me and taken a leave from her graduate studies to live with me in Colorado, where I was in the Army. We went back to University of Arkansas for her to finish her PhD and for me to go to law school. And I thought, God, you cannot be getting me into ministry at this point, because I can't leave law and I can't leave this woman. And she told me, you know, I've already taken one leave. So I said, I'll be the best Sunday school teacher you'll have. You'll just leave me alone. I thought I had a good deal with God, and went on the way. And then after I became a lawyer and became a partner in my law firm, the sense of call came back in such force that I realized this was inescapable. I was not going to have any peace to it. And it was also the sense that in ministry, I was going to be able to use, and I was going to be able to use both my legal training, but also my knowledge of systems, oppressive systems, and use that to, in a liberating kind of sense, to advance the cause of God's love. That was in 1984, 85. And that was a shock, because I thought I had to deal with God. And God promptly reminded me that God does not cut deals. And my wife was shocked, because she told me that marriage was, she never wanted to be a preacher's wife and never wanted to be a preacher's daughter. She wanted being both.
Oh.
Her father surrendered to ministry after she was grown, and I surrendered to ministry after I got married. And she thought, why does God do this to me?
Oh.
So that's how the calling came about. I distinctly remember being in my law practice and realizing that there has to be more that God has for me to do than chase the next lawsuit, and defend the next corporate giant that wants to get out of whatever harm they're accused of having committed to somebody. So the calling to ministry and the call of law sort of dovetailed when I became a judge, because judges are, I suppose, the closest thing to high priests in law.
Mm-hmm.
Long answer, I'm sorry.
No, I appreciated that answer very, very much, because I think it gives us a little bit about what your struggle was along the way too. I think for many people there can be more than one calling and more than one skill, and these skills can come together in ways sometimes we don't expect. But it's important to keep listening to where we feel we're being called. So I appreciate your sharing that journey with us.
Yeah, I realized that my problem was that I wanted to domesticate the Holy Spirit, and she does not domesticate well. She does not herd well. She leads well, but she is not domesticated.
Uh-huh. So some role reversals had to be considered there, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, tell me, what were some of your inspirations along the path? People or events? What have been your inspirational muses, so to speak?
My parents were very influential in my life. My parents were laborers. My father had an 8th grade education. He got his GED after I got out of college. My mother had a high school diploma, which was at that point in the 1940s a rare thing for a black woman in the rural South. Her mother was a widow, and sent her away to a school to get her high school education. So they were laborers in a farming community. My father worked in the timber industry as a logger or as sawmills, and my mother worked as domestic and then as a factory worker, as a chicken processor. but they were devout. And I suppose the three things you learned was faith, uh, school, and work. And they believed in education, they believed in reading, and they instilled in me, my sister, and my brother a love for reading, a love for books, and a love for people. Uh, they were the, the big factors in our upbringing. The community I grew up in, uh, I grew up in segregation, and the community I grew up in was defined by the Black church people, almost all of whom were kin to me in some kind of way. And they were aware in the 1960s that they were on the cusp of great change, and they made it their business to remind me. The elders said, we are not going to be able to go places you want to go, but we want to prepare you to get to where you're going to go. And so I think back in my mind's eye at ancestors, elders, who would give my mother, as they would say, a piece of money to put in an envelope to send me to college, and would pray for me and would ask me how I was doing. I think back about the elders. My father would take me as a child to get a haircut, and I sat in the barber chair with a man who, I don't know how far he went in school. I just know that every time I sat in the barber chair, it was quiz time. Spell Mississippi. What's the capital of Nebraska? He'd ask arithmetic questions. I was trying to get a haircut, and he was questioning me, and my father was watching. And this was part of the nurture. This was part of the nurture. When I flunked out of college years later, that man's brother had come back to our community from the north. He'd retired from the automobile factories in the north, come back to our community, and he bought a truck, and he got me to start hauling hay because I was too young to, I was 17 when I flunked out and too young to get a regular job. And he got a truck and said, listen, we're going to haul hay. And I hauled hay all summer. But that was the kind of those are the kind of nurturing people, the community.
Yeah, the community was investing in you.
It was investing in me. And these were people who had no reason to do that except that they realized that I was a child of God. They were children of God. And they had a God duty, a duty to God, to be partners with God in helping nurture people. I saw my mother do it. I saw my father do it. I saw the elders do it. They were instrumental. Their names will not make any difference to anybody except me, but their names and their faces are as clear to me now as they were when I was a child. Martin Luther King was a major factor for me. My father and my father always worked at a sawmill, and our family ritual was we had dinner when Daddy got in from the sawmill, and we watched the Huntley Brinkley news program. Chet Huntley, David Brinkley, for two reasons. Number one, because my parents wanted me to know current events, and number two, because my mother wanted me to practice diction. And she loved the way that Chet Huntley and David Brinkley spoke, and she wanted me to practice diction so that I would not have a Southern drawl, and I would not have the disability of not being able to speak well. And so we watched Birmingham, we watched Selma, we watched Montgomery. Well, not Montgomery. watched Birmingham and Selma. And I was sitting with my father in our family room around the kitchen table on April 4, 1968, when the news bulletin came in that Dr. King had been shot. And my father said, well, they got him. And I said, yes, sir. King's speeches, King's activism gave me a new sense of what it meant to be a preacher. I was familiar with the pastor role of preacher. I was familiar with the priestly role of preacher. But in King, I saw the prophetic, the activist as preacher. Mm-hmm. And that was important because there were Black preachers in Southwest Arkansas who were following in King's steps. There were some, most who didn't, but there were some who did. And among the ones who did was the guy who baptized me, Reverend Herman Raymond Green, Green, H.R. Green. He baptized me because I made my profession of faith during a revival at his church, although the revival was at his church, not the church I was a member of, my parents were a member of. But Reverend Green was a nurturing force. He was involved in civil rights. He was involved in protest movements. And he was a carpenter. He was a tent-making preacher. But he nurtured, he called young people baby. He would say baby. And would always give you pointers. I never will forget, Reverend Green was active in the local setting, just like Dr. King was nationally. And that was a good role model for me, because most Black preachers were trying to stay as far away from Dr. King as they could.
Wow.
I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but Dr. King was run out of the National Baptist Convention. He was expelled from the National Baptist Convention, which is the largest Baptist body for Black Baptists in the world, and that was the convention our church was a part of. He was expelled because of civil rights. He was stripped of all his offices and expelled. And the Progressive National Baptist Convention was formed by people who left the National Baptist after King was expelled. But King could not get a preaching invitation at most Baptist churches in Arkansas, just like Jeremiah Wright can't. Right. And so the prophetic side of being a preacher was not something I saw among many Black preachers, and certainly not among white preachers. I mean, the model of white preachers was Billy Graham.
Right.
And Billy Graham was anything but prophetic.
Yeah.
He was the pastor to the empire.
Exactly. Yes. All through his career for almost president. Yes.
And I think at the very last, Reverend Graham expressed some regret that he was not more. He said he didn't say more about social things, but Billy Graham was, and I don't say this disparagingly, I say it descriptively, Billy Graham was a religious nationalist. He was a Christian nationalist, and that was his agenda. He was never uncomfortable at any political setting, being the preacher who offered the prayer, the benediction. He was welcome at the White House, but he was never involved with protesting injustice.
Right. And unfortunately, that pattern has continued, I think, a bit there.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the apples never fall too far from the tree.
So, yeah. And so social justice is not taken into consideration there.
Well,
Unfortunately. Well, I think some of his family has spoken out a little bit, but
I really think that if we want to realize how socially incompetent many people who call themselves Christians are, we have to honestly say that lies at the feet of the evangelical Christian movement that Graham led for so long and with uh, so much acclaim. People gave themselves to Jesus, but did not give themselves to justice.
right. And it's hard, I think, for many of us to understand how people separate that out, but clearly it is done with impunity and with abuse.
And in college, I had a challenge because I had a love for King, and I began to read Malcolm X and James Baldwin and Ralph Ellison, and the the writings of Malcolm X and the speeches of Malcolm X and the writings of James Baldwin and Ralph Ellison really spoke to me. And I was trying to figure out how to put all this together because you couldn't go back home and talk about this with Dad and Mom because Dad and Mom were really steeped in the traditional Black church and church orthodoxy. Uh, but that they were King and Ellison and Baldwin and Malcolm X were great influences on me. In later years, uh, I spent only a brief time in seminary. I did. I was I was the world's worst seminary student uh, because I surrendered to ministry after I'd already become a partner in a law firm, and I went to seminary on an extension program through the Southern Baptist Convention, and they had a satellite seminary program in Little Rock. And this was during the time that the Southern Baptists were having their great big fundamentalist push.
Divide, yeah.
And I spent, let's see, 3 semesters in that, and I thought enough already.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't handle that. And so I discontinued that study. And thanks to the Cokesbury bookstore, which was down the street from my law firm, and the kind ladies who were at the Cokesbury bookstore who let me browse at length and read and buy, I became familiar with Reinhold Niebuhr and James Cone and Walter Brueggemann and the writings of theologians that were outside the fundamentalist realm, and they literally saved my sense of ministry.
How wonderful that you found your way to that bookstore and began.
Yeah, and I grieve now. I grieve even now that there is not a local religious bookstore for people like Wendell Griffin to go to.
Mm-hmm.
You know, thanks to the online booksellers, Cokesbury goes online, and so there is no local place. But what does a woman or man who is searching for ready access to religious literature and gentle spirits who will guide one in finding it. What does one do? Where does one go? We don't. I mean, I cannot tell you, Ellen, how many times I violated my lunch hour by overstaying my welcome at the Cokesbury bookstore. and 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 when that bookstore closed, it was like, well, that bookstore was like, that was my Cheers. You know, where everybody knows your name. That was my Cheers. And I met ministers there. I met authors there whose works I read. That's where I met James Cone.
Wow.
I met the writings of James Cone at that Cokesbury bookstore.
How wonderful.
That's where I met. That's where I met Walter Brueggemann. I met Walter Brueggemann's writings in the bookstore. That's where I met Reinhold Niebuhr. And but for that bookstore, I shudder to think what my ministry would be.
I want to thank you for how you just shared so many of the situations and the people that were inspiring to you. Part of our goal with Shine Your Light is to encourage people who don't think they have anything to give or any way that they can participate or do. You're reminding us of the people in your life, the people in the barbershop that quizzed you, the people that gave your mom a little money for your college. All of those people had such an incredible ministry. The people at the bookstore had such an incredible way of giving, and people take that for granted. And so I appreciate how you brought together the people and shared about the people and situations in your life that inspired you, so that those who watch this know they don't have to necessarily be the judge. They can be the person who puts some money in an envelope for somebody's college. It can make all of the difference. So thank you for that.
It makes a phenomenal difference.
Mm-hmm.
We're in Holy Week. We're in Holy Week as we do this interview. And I think it's the Gospel of John, where we read that Jesus, after he went to Jerusalem on what we call Palm Sunday, he went back to Bethany and stayed in the house of Simon the leper. We read about Simon the leper only that time. And we call Jesus an itinerant preacher, but Jesus was really homeless. Foxes have holes, birds have nests, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Jesus was homeless. And Mary and Martha and Lazarus and Simon, these were people who gave him a place to sleep, who fed him. Mm-hmm. And the point you make about the people who do those, we call them acts of compassion, but they are literally ministries.
Absolutely.
It's the gift of help. It's the gift of help.
There's power in that quietness and in that compassion. These are the people that don't seek any kind of limelight, but what a difference they make.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We like to ask people who we interview, what keeps you going when the going gets tough? And I know you've had some very tough situations in the last few years, and so you're welcome to share about those situations as well as what keeps you going, what keeps you balanced. How do you stay healthy when you meet these challenges?
Last week I had to go to Arlington, Virginia to be with my son for a health situation. He lives right around the corner he lives within walking distance of Arlington Cemetery. Saturday morning I walked to Arlington Cemetery, because when I'm in Washington and I get a chance to go to Arlington, I go there and I have a ritual. I go by the Kennedy's burial place and I read the inscriptions of President Kennedy's inauguration speech, read the inscription of Robert Kennedy's speeches, and I stopped by and visited and touched the headstone of Thurgood Marshall and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Her husband's stone is there. Her marker is just a marker. And always my last stop is at the tomb of Medgar Evers. When I think across the years, when I think of things that have been challenging me, I remember the sacrifices that others have made in the cause of justice. John Kennedy's life was lost. Robert Kennedy's life was lost. Medgar Evers' life was taken. Martin King's life was taken. Thurgood Marshall spent his entire career fighting for justice, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg spent her year fighting injustice. I think about those people, and they are my anchors. I think about Jeremiah Wright, who even now, even weakened with a stroke and confined to a wheelchair, Jeremiah Wright still is a prophetic genius and a prophetic role model. I think about J. Alfred Smith Sr., who was the pastor emeritus of Allen Temple Baptist Church in Oakland, who has become a surrogate rabbi to me. Reached out and grabbed me by voicemail on the church phone, and after reading some of my writings, and said in his wonderful voice, "I did not know that spirit was alive in Arkansas. It gave me heart, gave me courage." And Dr. Smith calls me or sends me a message, and those are people who help me anchor. Alan Buzak. I met through J. Alfred Smith Sr. When Alan and Elna came to go to Indiana, Dr. J. Alfred Smith told me they were going to be in the States and encouraged me and others to invite Alan to preach. And of course, our church had read Alan's book, Radical Reconciliation. And so I invited him to preach and had Elna and Andrea come with him. We became fast friends. Alan was with me in April 2017, when the death penalty thing went down. He was preaching for us for Christmas, for Easter. He did a lecture on Holy Saturday and preached for us on Easter. And Alan has been a wonderful, wonderful encourager. I would not be a writer if it were not for J. Alfred Smith Sr. and Alan Buzak. I would not be a religious writer because I did not believe I had the credentials to write. J. Alfred Smith Sr. said I did. Alan Buzak gave me a big brother talk and told me to stop poor-mouthing myself and stop giving. He said, you do not give the Holy Spirit enough credit. The Holy Spirit knows who you are. Alan and Dr. Smith and Dr. Wright are my present encouragers. Emily Towns at Vanderbilt and Teresa Smallwood, who is the Associate Director of the Public Theology and Racial Justice Collaborative at Vanderbilt Divinity School, are great encouragers. Emily teases me because we were on a program together for the Baptist Peace Fellowship, and we were on the same program on successive days. I spoke before she did, and I had to leave after I spoke. I learned after I left that Emily said, Wendell Griffin stole my text and preached my sermon. and so Emily and I became friends that way.
Oh, that's a wonderful story.
The story is even better because the sermon I preached was not the sermon I had intended. I had intended to preach a different sermon, but when I arrived and at the opening session, the preacher preached the sermon I preached, the very text. And so I had to, and so Emily and I were following each other's footsteps. I was having to.
Some kind of chain reaction happening there.
Yes. But Emily's a great encourager, and the work she has done as a womanist, as a theologian, dealing with the ethics of violence. It's just cutting edge stuff, and it's the stuff that kind of makes me say, "Hey, now that's a Baptist I can identify with."
I love it. What accomplishments would you say in your life that you're most proud of?
That's easy. I tell everyone that my greatest accomplishments are the sons my wife and I have, Martin and Elliot. The no award, no honor, no recognition comes even close to the three-letter word dad and the three-letter word son. They are my chief joy, and if I am to be remembered for anything, I want to be remembered as Martin and Elliot's dad.
Tell us a little bit about the two of them.
Martin was born in 1985. He was a prayer baby. Both our boys were prayer babies because we were married for 10 years before we had children. Pat and I were married for 10 years. We got married in 74. And we conceived Martin in 84. He was born in April of 85. We'd given up. We'd done all the stuff that people who deal with infertility issues do with. And had been probed and operated, and I was taking all kinds of pills, and we'd given up, and we decided we were not going to have children. We were exploring adoption, and then we decided to convert the room was going to be a nursery into a study. And lo and behold, we became pregnant with Martin. Martin came, and he is the contemplative child. Both sons are musically inclined. I'm the only person who doesn't play an instrument in the family. But he's the contemplative child, loves pondering and thinking. And Elliot, his younger brother, was born in '87. Elliot is the natural artist, hello, well met. He could sell sand in the desert. and he loves people. They are both compassionate people. They both care deeply about relationships, and they have a sense of heritage. Heritage as Black people, heritage as people who are the descendants of folks from a long line of folks who are overcomers. And so it's been a joy watching them grow from infants into men.
Oh, wonderful. Well, they were blessed with a wonderful dad, I'm sure they would say to us as well. So
their mom did more of the work, I suppose.
But I know that you've been so active as an activist pursuing social justice issues. What do you feel are the goals you still have going forward that you feel still need to be accomplished, still need to be worked on?
At this stage of my life, I am more convinced than ever before that I must devote more of my attention to writing and speaking, encouraging, challenging both my generation, the generation of the baby boomers, but also the coming generation, with the imperative of hope, the imperative of a hopeful sense of justice. We have lived through such dark times, pandemic, rise in bigotry, resurgence of bigotry, we're looking at what may be the resurgence of another post-Reconstruction kind of violence, like the kind of violence we had after the first Reconstruction with the Ku Klux Klan. We're looking at another set of that. And I am more convinced that I need to be writing more and speaking more and challenging more about that, because I'm from the last generation of Black people who have a first-hand lived experience with segregation. I was born in 1952. I recall Jim Crow quite well. I recall the Ku Klux Klan and White Citizens Council quite well. And I still keep my parents' poll tax receipts. After my mother passed away, we went through her things, and my sons found their 1963 poll tax receipts, Dad and Mom's. And Martin, the older son, said, "Dad, you need to frame this and keep it." And so I framed it on my study at the court chambers. But I'm seeing the same kind of deliberate acts.
No shame.
That I grew up with. I'm seeing the same kind of bigotry against women, the same kind of bigotry against people who are immigrants, the same kind of fake patriotism that is not really patriotism. It is simply white supremacy wrapped up in a flag and carrying a Bible and misrepresenting both democracy and the religion of Jesus. And so it is imperative that people from my generation, A, speak with urgent force in hopeful terms about the need to be activists, the need for those of us in the faith community to get off of our pew pads and get involved in the streets, in the work of challenging and changing our oppressive systems, to include the systems of religion that have been, in many respects, complicit and condoning of the very injustices that we're witnessing nowadays. And that's what I've got to do. And so I've got to resist the temptation. I'm a lazy writer, and I've got to resist temptation to procrastinate, and I've got to write more, and I've got to get this manuscript out on a book called The Hateful Faithful, because I think that is the challenge for our time. The hateful faithful and the threat they pose to democracy and justice is the challenge that I've got to write about and speak about, because it's a challenge not only in the United States, it's a challenge globally. Hateful faith is a global threat. Hateful faith is the faith that denies climate change. Hateful faith is the faith that sacralizes bigotry against LGBTQI children of God. It is the hateful faith that abuses women and girls in this country and then exports it to the global South, where it has become the great oppressive force in the Americas, and in Africa. We're dealing with hateful faith on the one hand, and we're dealing with hoarding faith on the other hand. The faith of the prosperity preachers, the Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes faith. Jeremiah Wright asked the question, or actually he poses the question that Vincent Harding may have asked: who won, Martin Luther King or Reverend Ike?
Wow. Powerful question.
Wonderful question. Because when you look at a lot of our congregations, they have King's picture up. They have King Days. But the ethos is that of Reverend Ike and Joel Osteen and T.D. Jakes. And ironically, we saw that most clearly in President Obama, who rejected the prophetic Jeremiah Wright, used Martin Luther King's Bible as a prop for his second inaugural, and called on T.D. Jakes to preach the sermon. That is telling. That is telling. And so we have to ask ourselves, does the religion of Jesus really have the kind of active, prophetic, courageous, fierce hopefulness that we must represent, we must present in order to be the salt of the earth and the light of the world? Because we cannot be retiring in the situation.
it's not safe to do so if we're going to save our democracy.
I don't think, I think we have to realize that the cross that the Spirit has called us to pick up in our time is the cross of activism and the cross of advocacy for the very people that Jesus spent his ministry around: women, children, the poor, the weak, the oppressed, immigrants, the marginalized, the incarcerated. We have to reconnect the ministry of Jesus, the religion of Jesus, with with the realities that Jesus dealt with, and that are as real in our time as they were in his time. And I think the Spirit is not going to leave us alone. She is not going to allow us to have peace and good for her.
Yeah.
Good for her.
This is a time when our goal at Shine Your Light is for everyone to find the way that they can contribute, because right now feet on the ground are needed in a desperate way to address so many of these issues.
And I'm glad that Shine Your Light is doing that. It's important because for too long we have, in the religion of Jesus, thought that the prophetic voice belongs solely to the ordained.
Mm-hmm.
And we tend to forget that throughout the canon, the Spirit moves in the lives of people who are not the ordained. We see this. You know, we see this unordained Hebrew servant who works to talk a Syrian military general into getting a visit by a prophet. Naaman, the Syrian commander, would never have gotten to the prophet to get healed had it not been for this unordained woman,
Mm-hmm.
whose name is not mentioned.
Right.
We don't know the name of the woman that Jesus spoke to at Jacob's well, but she was responsible for the work of Jesus in her whole community.
Your community too.
I mean, there are those who believe that the book of Hebrews was written by a woman. And there's serious scholars who believe it was written by a woman. We have women, we have lay people, we have children. Greta Thunberg is a prophet.
Yes.
And
Such a wonderful role model for her peers.
oh yes, and we must realize that the Spirit is moving in these ways, and we must get out of our pews, off our pew pads, and engage fully with our sisters and brothers as they are following the Spirit. I mean, the Spirit is not domesticated, and the Spirit does not want us to be domesticated either.
I love it. And I want to say thank you, by the way, for your writing. Shine Your Light has, our team members have really enjoyed many of the articles that you've written. And we look forward to this book. So do let us know when it's out. We want to be sharing that with as many people as possible.
Well, Alan Buzak has been on me because I've written part of it and published part of it in the most recent issue of Christian Ethics Today, hateful faith in our endangered world.
Oh, So we've got a section of it that's out there already that we can.
Yes.
For
The
it.
last,
Okay.
the most recent issue of Christian Ethics Today, you can get it online. It's
Okay.
free.
Okay.
Free.
Fabulous.
And so the title of the article is Hateful Fate and Our Endangered World. And so
And what you're speaking to, I understand in Arkansas, they just had passed a law that allows medical doctors to treat according to their faith. So if they don't agree with another person's lifestyle or whatever that is, it says the law says they shouldn't have to treat them. That's their decision.
well, I have been black long enough to recall that people denied serving folks food because they didn't believe that they deserved it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and this is Jim Crow in another way, and using religion as a pretext for it.
Right. Right.
This is the same kind of mindset is responsible for criminalizing people who perform abortions, people who perform medical procedures for people who are transgender.
Right.
And this is hatefulness. This is the hateful faithful.
Mm-hmm.
And their threat to democracy and justice. And what we're really seeing is a new dark ages.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. It feels like we're some kind of slingshot back into the medieval times.
And what I've read, I read the book Unholy that Sarah Posner wrote, where Sarah Posner is an investigative journalist who's done a wonderful deep dive into the evangelical. I recommend it.
Okay.
Unholy, why white evangelicals worship at the altar of Donald Trump.
That's an excellent book to be sharing with our listeners. Thank you.
It is a masterful book. It is meticulously researched. She's an investigative journalist and has spent her career looking at the religious right. And this is very readable, but I think about this when I think about what we're dealing with, because they came into office with Trump,
Yes.
prepared for this, but this was not casual. If you track the religious right, this is the same neo-fundamentalism that Pat Buchanan was articulating with his culture wars.
Yes. Yeah.
And that Falwell was articulating. And so this is, if the religion of Jesus is to be saved, we're going to have to save it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to save Jesus from the Christians.
Sadly. What would you, if you have any last words that you would like for our listeners to share with our listeners, any last thoughts that you want us to be thinking about and contemplating?
I want to, first of all, thank you, your listeners. I want to thank your community for being who you are. Alan Busak has spoken with me, and quite warmly, about your fellowship. And I want to thank you for who you are. You are doing intentional work. And this is not easy work. Let me just be blunt. You are people who have lived your lives with privilege. The privilege of whiteness,
Mhm.
the privilege of relative comfort, and you are having to re-examine the
Mhm.
things that you have been taught and the things you believed. And this is hard work.
Yes, it is.
It is not comfortable work, okay?
Mhm.
It is not work to be taken lightly. And as someone who knows something about the challenges of having to unpack the various layers of one's training and upbringing in order to remake oneself into what one becomes, I admire you. I first of all want to give you that kudo, and I don't say this lightly. Secondly, I want to urge you to remember that we are in a relay race. What becomes of this faith when our generation joins the ancestors will
Mhm.
be defined by what our generation does with the generation behind us and the generation after that. And so I want to encourage you to intentionally find out what the third generation, Generation Z and the one after that, are thinking. The ones who said, I'm done with church and I want any more church. And realize that they are, in a real sense, they are the church, not of tomorrow. They are the church within the church that we have not yet touched base with because we've been so busy being church.
Yeah.
And so whether it's, and I don't know who the groups are, I don't know who the people are who are active in Hawaii, but there are people in Hawaii who are probably not part of any church group.
Mhm.
I encourage you, please do not invite them to church. Please invite yourselves into their circles and say, we'd like to learn. We like to learn. We want to listen. We believe that you're about the work of justice, and we want to be about the work of justice too.
Mhm.
I think that's what's going to have to happen.
Thank you for that. And that is all the more encouragement for all of us to recognize there's a way for each of us to be doing something and reaching out to that next generation and hearing from them and listening to them. I think
And
that's
listen to them.
important too.
There are strengths they have that we lack. There is wisdom we have that they need. Our wisdom and their vigor can do wonders.
Mhm.
And they are not afraid. They have not learned fear of failure, and they have not learned to be embarrassed. And that is a blessing.
Yeah. And it's a good time then to make that connection. I love that
Amen.
suggestion. Thank you.
Helen, thank you for talking with me.
Thank you so much for being a part of this. It's just been delightful to have this time with you. I appreciate you giving us so much time. This is
And I appreciate your patience with me because I had to reschedule. So thank you very much.
Oh, not at all. That was very viable, and our schedules was flexible. We were happy to do that. So, well, we hope you have a good rest of your day. I know you've got less in your day than I do of mine. So you have a good one, and our thanks to you and to your family for allowing us to have this time with you as well.
God bless you.
All right, and you take
Thank
care.
you. You too.
Aloha.
Aloha.